Hello and welcome to the Consistently OK podcast. My name is Nick, and this is the Upside Down episode. Welcome. Okay, so we're back to, it's another kind of solo episode for me. Luke is not here, unfortunately, which is, of course, a tragedy. And he is dearly missed. I miss the guy every day, you know. He once said to me that we were never apart, and we've been apart. So, yes, Luke, if you're listening, my heart is breaking. Anyway, but this episode, whilst being kind of a solo episode, I am not on my own. So you won't have to just listen to my droning voice ramble on about said topic, because I'm joined by the wonderful, the immense Neil from Get Your Comic On. Hello, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm good. How are you doing?
Warm. Yes, warm. And
we are recording this in the middle of a London heat wave. We are slowly dying.
Yes, everything is.
What is the hottest day on record?
Yeah, I will do a slight guidance that if anybody hears any noises on the background of this podcast, I will try and minimize it, but I refuse to close my window because it's going to kill me.
Your only lifeline.
Yeah, is to have a little bit of a breeze. I hope that it rains shortly. But yes, so we are here on the Upside Down episode to talk about Stranger Things Season 4, Volume 2. So on my last hiatus episode, I talked about Volume 1 and my thoughts on it. But as you know, I don't know your thoughts on it. What are your thoughts on Volume 1, briefly?
I really enjoyed it. I thought it was excellent. I think I follow the general sort of pattern in that I think season 1 is just one of the greatest seasons of TV like ever. Yeah. And then season 2 was the usual like season 2 struggle. Mm-hmm. Although I don't think it's bad. I don't think it was great. And then season 3 was, pretty awesome and bounced back really well. And then I'm like, this is almost as good as season 1 for me. Like this is pretty awesome, the stuff that we're doing here. I think introducing Vecna was a great idea to finally pit them against a villain who can talk and get in their heads rather than kind of CGI monsters. And I know we've had some amazing monsters, and I was watching a featurette about the practical effects today, and I didn't realize the Demogorgon was quite practical in season 1.
Was it?
But it was. There was actually a man in a suit for a while.
No way.
But to actually have a kind of mustache twirling villain, I think, was a great choice for this season. And so I thought Volume 1 was great. I do wonder whether it needed to finish where it finished. I don't think I quite understand the logic behind this, like 7-episode, 2-episode split, but brilliant season up to that point, I think.
Yeah, I think, the split was an interesting one. I think, like narratively, I kind of get the sense that it's like you're going into a finale, so here's maybe a place where they could stop it, but it felt very much more like we just haven't finished 2 episodes. So
yeah, totally agree with you. Because I'm just kind of refreshing my memory reading the synopsis for the episodes, and I almost feel like 6 was a place where you would break if you were going to have a break. So 6 is the one that ends with everyone kind of going into the Upside Down. And then, so it ends with Nancy, Robin, and Eddie diving down after. It's too hot to remember names. Steve. I was going to say the one with the hair. And then you had episode 7, which kind of goes back to refocus on Joyce and Yuri and what's happening in Russia, and obviously reveals what was going on with Vecna and who he really was, etc., etc. But I feel like you could have ended it with them going after Steve, and that would have been more of a like, no, I have to wait like 2 months for more episodes and then bring it back, rather than doing what they did. So I'm that's my only, I think, real gripe with this season, is where they chose to break up that narrative for a random break.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think like I loved Volume 1, which I said in the previous episode, but going into Volume 2, I can understand almost like why this works as a pair.
Yeah.
But I also think that the episode at the end of Volume 1, it didn't kind of leave me with like, well, I need to know what's next. It was just sort of like, oh, okay, now I've got to wait.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah. Whereas there probably were other episodes in volume 1 where it felt more like what happens next. Which I think
imagine breaking the narrative on Max. Imagine if Max had been a break.
Yeah, like if they'd done
kind of had that whole scenario that we'd built up to. You could have ended it with her floating up in the sky and not done the whole Kate Bush thing until later on, and then everyone would have been like, like, how long do I have to wait? Okay, I'll go watch something else for a few weeks and come back.
Yeah, it was an odd one. Curious. I wonder whether they'll do anything like that with season 5 as well, whether they'll split it up or whether it will just all come out as one batch.
I know they've talked about the fact that the episodes will be shorter, apart from what will be the last ever episode. They've said that will probably be another sort of 2.5 hour epic, but I wonder. Or I almost wish, for it being the final season, if they can actually go bigger than what they've done. And I struggle to wonder how they can act. Well, obviously there is a cliffhanger that we'll get to. I kind of struggle to wonder how they can go that much bigger than where they've gone right now. But I almost want them to roll out this final season weekly.
Yeah. I was having this conversation with somebody recently, kind of awesome. Actually, that I feel like the weekly release, I prefer now. I feel like for a period of time, I loved the binge.
Yes.
But then I slowly got to a point where I was binging a load of stuff and I wasn't actually taking in episodes. I was sort of taking in like the big moments, but I wasn't taking in whatever was actually happening story-wise. Whereas with your weekly shows, I almost remember the narrative of each episode. And so with Stranger Things, I tried to pace it where I was like, right, I'll do like an episode a night or an episode every 2 nights or something to try and like make sure I remember everything. And I'd be in for that if they did the 5th series and they were kind of like, we're going to release it weekly and sort of pad it out.
We did exactly the same thing. I think the only time we may have watched, so we watched 8 and 9 back to back, mainly out of curiosity to see if it would feel like watching 4 hours of TV. I don't think we did any other episodes in this block back to back. We did them over different nights. So I think, and we took random breaks as well for other stuff that was going on. So I think it took us about 2-3 weeks to watch volume 1, and then volume 2 was just done in the night. Yeah,
I was the same. Volume 2, I pretty much just watched in one sitting. I had COVID, and so I was like, right, let's pick myself up, and I'm going to watch just back-to-back episodes of this. So
that's a fever dream.
I know, right? It was literally, in fact, it was the last time I recorded this episode. When I recorded the hiatus episode, I finished that and then immediately fell into a fever. And, great. But then I woke up and I was like, I've got Stranger Things to watch, so fine. I can handle it. Okay, so going into volume 2 then, I will say, and this would have been in the episode description as well, there will be spoilers. So just be warned. Going into volume 2 then, the first thing I thought to kind of talk about was there's been obviously a lot of chat about the episode lengths. I know obviously volume 1 had longer episode lengths, but then volume 2 we were sort of told would be basically 4 hours all in, or is it 4.5 all in? Something like that.
I think it's over 2 hours for episode 9, isn't it? But it's closer to 1.5 hours for episode 8.
Yeah. And there was a lot of chat online about people who are kind of being like, that's too long. It's too long. But I didn't feel like it was across these 2 episodes. I felt like it kind of just, there's nothing in it that I'd take out, I think is the thing. That's always my judgment of like, if something's too long is where I'm kind of like, well, if there's a plot thread that I'm kind of like, you don't need that, then But watching those 2 episodes back to back, I was like, I mean, it sort of feels like the culmination of everything. And I also think that narratively, what they did with having almost like 3 different plot lines, trying to all connect them to the same thing, and geographically these 3 plot lines being in different locations, that's the kind of thing where you almost need the extra time to make sure that all of those strands work. And so I didn't feel like it dragged. I felt like they just kind of gave room to everything that they needed to. But did you feel like it pulled at any point?
No, I agree. There was, I think the only time that I really gave it much thought while I was watching it was when Vecna had 11 in his mind zone. So not in the upside down, but I've forgotten what they call it now. the red bit, and he was really twirling the mustache and giving a proper monologue. But in my head, I thought, interesting. This is why this episode is so long, because they're giving everyone the time to do all of the tropes, but they're all doing it so well that actually I don't care. Because it all has enough time. So it's exactly like you said. I didn't really. The only subplot I wondered whether you could have whittled down by that point maybe would have been Russia, but Russia has a great payoff with a random sword that. Why was that lying on the floor of a Russian prison? But in terms of the actual runtime, I thought it all worked pretty well, and it was told the way it should have been. I think if you cut it down, it would have started to feel like you chopped into it.
It definitely felt like I think it felt like they fully put story first, in the sense of we don't want to trim anything to make sure that the pace of this is necessarily like a beat for a minute kind of thing. It almost felt like they wanted to make sure that you understood every character's motive and gave every single character, as you said, like almost a monologue. They almost had their own like moment to shine, and they didn't want to take any of those moments away from anyone, because everybody is sort of like a cog in this story. And that was one of the things about season 4 as a whole. But I kind of felt like, especially in this last 2 episodes, that took me by surprise a little bit, in that you talked about season 1 earlier on. Season 1, I love, obviously. Season 2, again, I'm like you, where it's good, but it feels a lot like it's trying to do season 1 again. Like it's still really good, but it doesn't necessarily like reinvent anything. 3, I thought, did reinvent everything. I love 3. And I think part of that is because it's like they went for the full bright 80s and then almost like juxtaposed it with like the darkness of the Upside Down and Billy's storyline and everything. And so there's a really nice kind of balance to that. But 4, it almost went into this like other level of epic that I didn't expect. Like I never would have thought Stranger Things would be an epic. I always thought it was just that kind of like cool horror kind of throwback series, and this season seems to just elevate that. And I think a big part of that is because it's suddenly you're dealing with so many characters, but none of these characters really feel like they're supporting or background. Like they've almost all got their own they've all got their own kind of like plot lines. They've all got their own kind of characteristics. And I think part of that is because they're letting them just have the time to give everyone that. Which I think is really nice. But yeah, it really took me by surprise that this season just went for that like level of epic.
It is a surprising step up in terms of consequence. I wondered whether it would, just because of the fact that we knew from the cliffhanger and the kind of the fact that David Harbour was never actually leaving Stranger Things. I did wonder how global it would go, with the fact that it was clear he was in Russia. Surprisingly not as global as I thought, because it really was just like Russia, desert, Hawkins. So in my mind, I'd wondered whether it would become this massive like global scenario, and I thought that might not have worked, because I don't see this group of kids saving like the entire world. It's all they need to save like their world, not like everyone. But seemingly, actually, maybe I was wrong, and that's season 5. We'll have to wait and see. In like 3 years' time.
Oh, I hope it doesn't take that long, but I'm sure it will probably be a long wait. I
think from what I understand and what I'm hearing, they're still writing. They plan to finish writing by the end of the year, begin production early next year, shoot for most of next year, with a view to it releasing at a similar time of year in 2024.
Okay, 2 years.
Yes, the last 2 seasons finished shooting roughly 6 months before they then came 6 to 8 months before they were then released. There's like 6 to 8 months of post-production. Whereas I mean that could be an even longer process this time if it's an even bigger season.
Yeah, crazy. I did wonder, because they've talked about the fact that whilst this storyline will end with season 5, there's kind of the talk of spin-offs and other people carrying on the the universe effectively. And I did wonder, as you said, whether that would go more global in terms of whether you like whether the upside down would spring up in other places and you then tell those stories, and how that works. I don't know how they'd quite make it work, but maybe there's something that they can kind of do with it. But yeah, I thought these last two episodes just narratively just carried so much weight and kind of packed in so many like awesome character moments that I feel like they didn't have to. There's a lot in there where if they wanted to just tell like a pulpy kind of like horror flick, they could have done that. Like there's a lot of areas that they could take character out, but I really like that everybody gets a moment to shine. And obviously everybody's rightly talking about Eddie, who I thought was awesome. But I did call it really early on. I think I said it in the other episode where Stranger Things has this habit of introducing a character that's really cool and then killing them.
Every season.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, it's going to be Eddie. Like he's the one that's going to kick it. But I thought it was still really cool, and I liked that they gave him. He doesn't go out where you'd think he would go out. I think that was the thing, is that you kind of assume when he's rocking out with the guitar, you're like, well, that's his like swan song. That's the end. But he goes out in a very cool fashion, and I thought that was really touching as well. That he sort of dies with Dustin, and they've got a really nice dialogue going there, I think, as well.
And some of it ad-libbed as well.
Was it?
There's quite a lot of ad-libbed moments in the final couple of episodes. Yeah,
interesting.
If you look it up on Twitter, I think they did quite an in-depth interview, the Duffer Brothers, on a podcast, and they picked out a few key moments that were ad-libbed. So like one of them is when Lucas calls out to his sister, when you kind of think that Lucas is maybe actually going to end up killing the jock idiot guy. Him calling out to his sister for help is ad-libbed. The line between Eddie and Dustin about when Eddie says to him like, "Oh, I love you," again, completely ad-libbed. There's some really like key emotional moments that they allowed the kids to ad-lib, which is quite sweet.
Nice. I really like that. It definitely felt like that. I feel like I always talk about it in this podcast, but I feel like you can always tell when there's a show or a comic or like a game or something where everybody who's involved in it has the same passion and the same kind of drive to tell a story that they love. Like you can kind of feel it in a production, I think. And this season felt very much like that. It felt like everybody was kind of giving their all to try and tell this huge story, and to really kind of like invest themselves in it. I don't feel like there was kind of any performances, any kind of aspects of like production visual wise. It was all really strong, and I love that. I really felt like there was a lot of heart on it. Like even like Vecna as a character, I feel like is really interesting.
Definitely.
Like I think Jamie Campbell Bower's awesome, but his work with Vecna or Henry or One, whatever you want to call it, it's nice that he's complex. He's not just kind of like, you know, I'm a villain from the Upside Down. There's like a history there, and there's a bit of meat to his kind of story.
I wondered whether what we were going to learn. I figured out quite early on that he was one, and then I figured out quite early on that Henry was one, and therefore Henry was also Vecna. But I wondered whether the moment where I figured there was obviously going to be a moment where she was going to throw him into where 11 would throw him into the Upside Down. But I thought that was going to be the creation of the Upside Down, not that it was already there. So there's still some kind of mythology to explore there if they even have, if they want to try and give us an idea as to why it exists.
Yeah, I love that as well, where you kind of see him like walking through the Upside Down and then sort of like becoming Vecna. And it's not that he becomes Vecna just through falling through the gap and into the Upside Down. It's like there's almost like a journey that he goes on through that world, and that's what turns him into it. I just thought that was really nice to kind of see, and him kind of meeting the mind flare and stuff like that. It was just, it felt like they'd managed to link season 1 to season 4 very easily.
My only question that I'm confused by, and the fact that it is kind of quite majorly portrayed, makes me think that there'll be some reason for it later on. So obviously it already existed. We know that from when she threw him into it. He was there, as you just said. He meets the mind flayer. He wanders through it. We get to see him. Somehow it continues to update itself to reflect the world on the other side. So buildings appear somehow, like the people's belongings also exist inside the houses. They are exactly as they were. But I want to so I'd like to understand that, but also why time stopped when Will went in. So whether that's connected to the fact that Will can still feel what's going on down there, I don't know. But they showed the whole scene when Nancy went to get her guns, but there were no guns because time hadn't moved on that far. I want to know why time stopped when Will went in, and surely that should have impacted on. I'm now thinking about this too much, and now I'm going to start. The plot's just going to start like falling apart. Like, why is Vecna not confused that things haven't continued to develop since then? I need more on that.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that they opened up. I think especially in the last 2 episodes as well, is, as you say, it's almost like the mythology of the Upside Down. And there's kind of always been that question of like, what is it? Since season 1, you're kind of like, what is it? Where did it come from? Has it always been there? All these questions. And I feel like you're starting to kind of get the answers. And again, this is one of those narrative things that, they could have easily have waited till the final season to tell you all of this. But I think they've got a different trajectory in terms of like, well, we've got so many, like, I can't even think of how many characters at this point that they're trying to tell all the individual stories of. And so they're almost trying to do all of these as well as then give you this mythology and this universe and this kind of world building. So I think you're right that it can start to unravel if you think about it. But I think it's almost the other sense that I think they've just given you like seeds. They've kind of given you things where they're like, think about this, and we're going to answer it when we get to it. But for now, it's a case of like, I want you to go away and almost create your own kind of thoughts on this, and we'll see where we are in 2 years or whatever. But and I think that's part of like their epicness, like in terms of the storytelling, is that
you don't want to give it all away too quickly, do you?
I feel like it would have been so easy for them to do like, here's all the story of the Upside Down, here's the story of Vecna, and then going into this final season, it's just a big battle. Kind of like Game of Thrones. Like Game of Thrones was like building up to this final season where like all hell's going to break loose, all these people are going to fight dragons everywhere, and then season 7 was pretty much that, but not necessarily thought out. Whereas
we'll invent democracy.
Whereas I feel like Stranger Things is a bit more methodical in the sense of, we're going to give you that big battle, the big face-off of Upside Down versus this world and all these characters, but at the same time, we're not going to tell you necessarily everything up front, so that the final season isn't just the big battle. There's still a lot of understanding to do.
Do you feel like there's any characters that slightly sorry, it's just started to absolutely like pour with rain?
Amazing. Cool things down. I still haven't had the showers.
Sorry, I was going to say, were there any characters that you felt were slightly disserved, or that's not a word, in the background this season that deserved a little bit more?
I
have one.
Yeah, probably 2. I've got maybe a little bit of Will. Because I feel like you probably get that out of these 2 episodes. I think you get more of Will in these 2 episodes than you do in the first volume. And I think it's really nice. Like his thing with the painting and his conversation where he says like, you're the leader, you're kind of like that, I thought was great. Like it's just great dialogue and it hits the right tone. And again, then you make him quite integral in the final like 10 minutes, which I really want to discuss. But giving him that link back to the Upside Down and how he returns to Hawkins and he's kind of like, I can feel everything, like it's there.
Yeah.
So I feel like Will maybe just through volume 1, not so much volume 2. And then the other is Jonathan. I feel like Jonathan didn't really get like a strong moment. Like he had a few, and there's obviously the tension between him and Nancy. But I feel like I noticed it especially when he has that conversation with Will, where he's kind of like,
so amazingly written.
Yeah, incredible. But I did kind of think again, I was like, yeah, he sort of hasn't had his moment in volume 1, and so maybe this season wasn't necessarily his. But again, you know, if you went into volume 1, you were kind of like, oh, I feel like they've, you know, done over Will or Jonathan. When you get into volume 2, you're like, oh, okay, then no, they have done something at least, and they've given them those monologues, they've given them those moments. So you kind of are reminded that they're still on like a journey, that they've still got something there. But yeah, they were probably the two. How about you? Who was your one?
Mine would be Mike.
Okay.
I feel like Mike ended up just being a plot device for other characters. So for Elle, it was kind of proving herself that she could live this life and that she was living a wonderful life, and that Mike needed to see how great things were for her in California when they really weren't. And then the kind of the fallout from that, and the fact that they would then have an argument, and that then, you know, everything else would take precedent over it, but he would come and find her. And then he's also just then at the end of Will's storyline, because he's the person that we presume Will is lusting after. But the two of them, all they really do is fall out, and Will pines over him, and then Will gets him back together with Elle, and it then upsets Will that he's kind of helped his friend, but it's left him heartbroken. And I thought Mike is a little bit just helping everyone else at the moment. He's not really doing anything for himself, which is kind of sad. But
yeah,
I can see that changing in the next season.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think again, I think that's what works in the favor of volume 2, is that it does give Mike the purpose, whereas in volume 1 he doesn't. He, as you say, he's kind of just plodding on, and he's the one chasing after Elle. But volume 2 then gives him by giving him that dialogue of like, you're the leader, like you're the one who can, you do set him up for where he's going to go. And I thought that was quite interesting, how almost in season 1 you feel like Mike is not necessarily the lead of the show, but in some way, out of the kids, he's kind of the one who you're seeing almost through his eyes a little bit.
Yes, definitely. And I suppose you've also got the fact that they all congregate at his house, and his parents are the ones that you see the most. And obviously you've got Nancy as well, who then you've got the family relation. So I guess they have always felt maybe slightly more centric than some of the others.
But I feel like, this season it became almost apparent that there almost isn't a specific show lead, because everybody's got a story. Like I absolutely love, I always forget her name, this is really bad, but Maya Hawke's character,
Robin,
I absolutely love Robin as a character. I think she's great. Like her rapport with Steve is just awesome. And I, again, talking about the kind of moments that, you know, they didn't necessarily have to include, but I love the storyline of her and like her trying to find love, and her and Steve's rapport this season kind of being about like trying to find the person that you want to be with, in the middle of telling this huge epic story about like Vecna and the Upside Down and stuff. You've got these two people who are trying to search for like love and kind of who they want to be with and how they want to kind of like be like as a person, like individually. And I just thought that was really interesting, to kind of allow the time for her to have those moments, and then in the final 10 minutes you give her that moment of connecting with that character finally, because you like, they didn't have to. They could have easily just had that ending as close up of like all the kids see the Upside Downs hitting in this world and then end. But the ending, which I really want to talk about, because the last 10 minutes are probably the 10 minutes that I critiqued the most, but I also loved everything in there. In that it feels a little bit disjointed because
it's a very sudden like shift into like incredibly high gear when we're already in pretty high gear as we are.
Yeah,
it's like we're growing and we're growing and we're growing, and then we just explode.
Yes,
quite literally in some respects.
Yeah, I also thought that the decision to have it where there's some characters who leave Hawkins, there are some who stay, despite the fact that this basically hell has opened up in their town, was it didn't feel organic to me in some way, in that it kind of felt like they were almost kind of going, well, we need these people to stay in Hawkins. We need a way for all our lead characters to get back into Hawkins, but then also we don't want the town full of people.
Yeah.
And so the last 10 minutes is kind of like, they give us amazing moments like Dustin's conversation with Eddie's dad, uncle,
dad.
That's really nice. And they give you the Nancy and Jonathan tension. They give you the moment of Elle with Hopper, and they give you all the moments where the kids get back together, and you get this sense of like, yeah, everyone's back together. But it's in the wake of
a vegetative state in a hospital bed.
Yeah. But it's in the middle of like, your town has a massive like cavity in it that is pretty bleak. And then they give you the final shot, which is like epic. Like the score's amazing there. Like the shots are great. It looks huge. And as you say, it sort of does go into this suddenly, oh my God, moment. But I just felt like the pacing was weird, where it was kind of like going into the final, it's like really, really high stakes. Like Elle's getting battered. Like everything's sort of going wrong for them. Like Max is getting done in, like everything's going wrong. Vecna's winning. Then they pull it back. They get the win, kind of. Vecna escapes. Then it's a time jump. And then they give you the character moments. And then they end on this huge thing. And it just felt a little like narratively disjointed. But then at the same time, I absolutely love all of those moments individually.
Yeah,
it's just almost in like a weird order.
There is a bit of a step change, I think slightly earlier than that I noticed as well, which is when they go to the whatever, like gun store, and they're getting all their weapons to go to the Upside Down. The town is going nuts, and it's like, why? I don't quite understand the escalation point from there's this guy, someone has died, to Eddie is a murderer, to several people have died, to now the whole town is either escaping, driving away, packing up and leaving, or going and buying weapons as if there's a war. Because as far as everyone should be aware, there is only a potential murderer who could be on the loose. So the level of hysteria doesn't feel right at that point. And then it does this moment where everything goes completely crazy. And suddenly it's like, this is, I'm struggling with where you are on the Richter scale at this point, because we're kind of in a few different places at the same time.
I think that is it. It's just, I think especially after a season where it felt like everything was so methodically planned out, it felt like they almost got to the ending and they were kind of like, well, we've got all these amazing individual moments of like character beats, and we've set up a lot of plot threads here, but also we know where we need to end, so let's just hope if we put all of them together, it will kind of give you the right ending. It felt a little bit rather than stitched together, kind of like stuck together with tape a little bit. But it was like a really hard one to critique, because I was like, at the same time, I was kind of like, this is amazing. Like, it's so well written. Like the score's hitting the right place. The performances are amazing. It was
the
like
visual effects are great.
Yeah, like again, I think the whole volume. I know they've talked about the fact that they've touched up a few things since, which George I was like, Lucas. I was like, that's very curious. And I read a thing with them, I think today, where they said about the fact that Netflix were like, we don't do that. And they were like, but why? Let's just try it. And they just went for it.
I know they'd said the only way you'll be able to know what they've changed is to go back and watch the DVDs if you happen to report Stranger Things on DVD. I would imagine sales have skyrocketed. But I would be interested to see if anybody's written up all the changes that they found. I know the obvious one was Will's birthday.
Yeah, they've changed the date.
They made that mistake themselves, so they have fixed their own mistake by changing his birthday, which I'm sure has upset a lot of hardcore fans who will still say that his birthday is in March and not in May. But there we go. That's the only one that I think I know of. A friend was watching it the minute it went live. So when most of us were trying to get on to Netflix when it crashed.
Yeah, crazy.
I know someone that actually got in and watched it straight away, and he said there were a few scenes in that chapter 9 that looked quite heavily unfinished that he rewatched later and said now they look finished. So I do think there was quite a few unfinished effects if you watched it the second it went live.
Yeah, it's I find that really interesting as well, the fact that they were so up against the wire with the visual effects.
Crunch time has now become a TV thing as well as a computer game thing.
Yeah, God, that the Marvel stuff recently, I was like, oh my God.
What I don't understand, I guess, okay, fair enough. Maybe there's an argument somewhere in the world that Stranger Things is on a similar level to Marvel, but maybe not with a big factory like Disney. That sounds like I'm putting Disney down. Yeah, why not? But with something like Stranger Things on Netflix, if you know that you're not going to be finished, why not go, actually, we'll release it like next week?
Yeah.
Where is the disaster in, because that's what you would do with a computer game if it was genuinely not finished. Look at Cyberpunk. We're not finished. We're not going to release it. We're going to keep working on it. So why can you not do that with a TV show? I guess with a movie, you've got, obviously you paid for screens, you've paid for marketing, posters. There's a million different aspects in play, which maybe you've not got with TV, but particularly streaming TV. I don't see why you can't just say, look, we're really sorry. We're going to just move it back a week.
Yeah, I wasn't sure whether part of it was that, again, without knowing how Netflix's calendar system works, whether part of it is that they block off like a time where they're kind of like, okay, we've got no other kind of major shows launching this window, to promote, market the show, get cast and whoever on like press and do all these things has to be in this window.
Probably
pick a date, and then they almost were in a position where they're kind of like, well, we could get 7 episodes done here, and then the last 2 will probably take another month on that. Can we just break the season up and do it this way and sort of just do it a bit on our feet? It did strike me as a bit kind of odd, but then watching it, I wouldn't have had any issue with the visual effects. Like I didn't watch it first thing in the morning. It was probably like later in the evening when I got to doing it. But the visual effects were amazing. Like, better than some of the recent Marvel stuff as well, which was crazy. I was like, oh my God. Like, and knowing as well that they did that in basically a month, like those 2 episodes, because when they launched Volume 1, they said that they hadn't even finished Volume 2 yet, that they were like, it's still
working on it.
So knowing that they were delivering like that kind of level of it, it's almost like, okay, I can get it. But it was just curious, as to why they did it. I don't think it hasn't impacted their viewership because they've been ridiculous. But I would like it with Volume 5, as you say, whether they release it weekly rather than in chunks, because I feel like it didn't deter the narrative from me, but I did notice the difference between Volume 1 and 2 in terms of, like, as I said, with like character beats. And I think part of it is because I had that time where in between Volume 1 and 2, you can kind of sit there and go, oh yeah, like Mike didn't get much of a say, or Jonathan didn't get much of a say.
Yeah.
And then you get Volume 2 and you're like, oh, well, that's their moment. It was kind of leading there. Whereas I guess when you're writing the show, you don't really think, well, this is going to come out in 2 volumes, like we're going to split it.
No, true. Yeah.
So yeah, I thought it was interesting, but it was just the last 10 minutes that I think it was just, there was a lot going on, but a lot going on.
A lot of it ended up being more about what's next and not let's tie up where we are at now.
Yeah.
It felt a little too focused on where it needs to go next and not on reflecting on where it had just been.
Yeah. And I think where they leave it, like, it is such an epic shot. Like, it's such a big moment of kind of like, whoa. It's just the questions I've then got is like, why isn't everyone leaving Hawkins? Like, besides the characters who can actually do something about this.
Yeah.
And I guess they don't have to answer it. Like, I'm not going to be like, how dare they not?
I'm just trying to remember what was mentioned in terms of what they saw on the news. So they were talking about, they're still talking about Eddie on the news because that's the impetus for that conversation between Dustin and his dad. But they don't talk about there being like a national emergency or anything, do they? I don't think we get to hear what is kind of being perceived as to what's going on with the upside down bleeding in. I don't think.
No, I think there might be one video thing where they just say that this crack opened up.
Like a disaster, isn't it? It's considered like an earthquake or something.
Yeah. But I kind of thought, I was like, when it opens up and you can see like an orange glow in a crack, surely
kind of know it's not a normal earthquake.
Yeah, like surely your town would be like, I'm just gonna get out of here because this isn't right. And I get also that, you know, maybe there would be characters who are kind of stubborn and they're kind of like, well, I'm not leaving my home. I don't care what it is. But that it just all felt a little cluttered, but it's like a hard one because it's so well done that I'm kind of like, this doesn't flow, but also I'm really enjoying every single bit of it. But yeah, so yeah, I loved Volume 2. I just thought the whole I think it's an exceptional piece of storytelling that takes a show from a kind of 80s throwback horror thing to this level of epicness that is just talked about in pop culture. And I thought especially as well, like a return, having been off screen for 3 years or whatever it was.
I know.
To be able to come back and still deliver is an impressive feat. And I'm just so excited to see where it goes next. I'm just curious who the next character is that I'm going to love that's going to die.
Yeah. The other thing I think about it is I can't think, and I don't even know that season 3 did this. Season 1 definitely, but I don't know about 2 or 3. For a while, it was all you kind of heard people talking about wherever you went as well. Like you would either see someone watching it on the train, or you'd hear people talking about it in the street, or like I was getting my hair cut a couple of weeks ago and was talking to my hairdresser about it, and somebody else in the room came over and was like, are you talking about Stranger Things? Because, oh my God, that was amazing. I'm really sorry to interrupt you, but I think I heard you talking about it. And I just need to, oh my God, I need to talk to someone about it. Amazing. And you don't get that very much anymore, really. No. There's not a lot of event TV like that that's not like Love Island or some sort of reality show people, you then find people talking about kind of wherever you go. Not just in in Forbidden Planet where, you know, everyone's talking about it anyway, because that's the kind of thing that we all love. But like somewhere completely random and hear people talking about it, to me personally, that just doesn't happen.
I think it's really tapped into pop culture in a very like open way. It doesn't feel like it's like, even with Marvel now, you get, obviously there's a load of people watching Marvel stuff, but there's some people at this point who are kind of tapped out because they're like, there's just so much. Or it's people who are kind of like, I'm bored of superheroes or whatever. Whereas Stranger Things seems to be, I've not really, I've also not spoken to anybody who's been like, season 4 was awful. Like,
no, me neither, actually.
I've seen just like unanimous praise for it and people pulling out different parts of it, and obviously Kate Bush getting a lot of love, which is awesome, and Metallica getting a bit of love. Metallica was very cool. And I appreciate as well that Joseph Quinn like learnt the riff. I was like, that's very cool. Again, I just thought it was all awesome. I'm
actually seeing them live next week. I've never seen Metallica before. I'm seeing them next week. Nice. I'm kind of wondering how many Stranger Things t-shirts I will spot in the vicinity.
I was in Paris the week before Volume 2 came out, and when I was in the Louvre, I walked past somebody who's wearing a Hellfire Club t-shirt. I was like, Nice. I respect that so much.
They're kind of everywhere at the moment. I want one, but at the same
Yeah.
time, I think everyone has one, which makes me go, well, maybe I don't want one right now. I'll
Give
wait
it
till it's not cool again.
Yeah, give it like a year and then just break it out.
Yeah.
You'd be fine. I can guarantee at San Diego Comic Con this weekend there will be so many Stranger Things people. I'm curious to see people who dress up as Vecna.
That'd be some amazing Vecna cosplay.
It is commitment. I thought again as well, like, you know, it was about practical effects. The practical effects on Vecna were amazing.
Yes, they just released a featurette on it. It's up on YouTube. I
cool.
highly recommend it if you're interested in that kind of stuff, because they do talk you through kind of how they came up with the prosthetics and the fact it wasn't just a bodysuit, it was individual pieces.
Yeah.
But they even go down to the fact that they were mechanical fingers on the long hand. So his giant hand, it wasn't like rubber fingers or CGI. It was actually mechanical individual fingers on each of his fingers that he then had to learn how to do. And he said he spent hours working on Vecna's mannerisms, just getting used to using these mechanical fingers so that it looked natural.
It's insane.
8 hours to put it on.
I read that it was 8
hours to take it off.
Yeah. And I read I was watching an interview with Jamie Campbell where he was just sort of saying they were listening to like a lot of heavy rock and stuff while he was doing it to kind of like get himself into the mode of this character. I just thought it was all really cool, and it just, I don't know, there was just something about these last 2 episodes which was just kind of like it really felt like a culmination, and I don't think I've felt that for a long time, maybe since like Infinity War Endgame.
Yeah.
Where you feel like, oh my god, like what's going to happen, and the dread as well of like when Vecna's absolutely winning and everybody's sort of getting battered and beaten, and you're kind of like, this is going very south, even though you kind of know, well, there's another season, so obviously it'll work out, it'll be fine. They still do a good job of, they do a good job at giving you tension of like, oh my god, I don't know how this like will go, and it makes you feel that, it makes you kind of like really feel a sense of, oh, I'm dreading. But yeah, I just thought everything was great. Visual effects, practical effects, cast, score, which I've listened to a lot. I think the score was great. I love the score for 3. There was something about the score.
3's brilliant.
Yeah.
I think so. I've got a playlist of all 4 seasons now.
Nice.
And I think it now runs to something like 9 hours. So I can start it before I fall asleep at night, and I wake up and I'm at the end of season 4, which is kind of random and cool at the same time.
Nice.
I've seen them live as well. They were amazing live. Really, really short set. They only played for like 35 minutes, 40 minutes. But they do this really cool thing where they basically turn all the lights off. And all they have is a very, very small light show on the front of their like computer decks, and a few lights behind them. And that's all. And it's all just like timed in with the music that they're doing. It's a very cool visual show.
That's awesome. Yeah, I thought the piece that plays like in the last 10 minutes and it just builds and builds and builds. And I think there's like a choir attached to it as well. And it's just hitting such a high note. It really reminded me of like Empire Strikes Back, like the ending where you're kind of in the sense of like they won, but they also did get kind of beaten.
Their asses were handed to them.
Yeah. So it's like they made it out, but not necessarily with the best outcome. And I think the setup for that was great. So I'm really excited to see where they go with season 5. Do you have anything that you kind of think with season 5 you want them to specifically answer or explore?
I would like to understand the scenario that time had stopped in the Upside Down. This is, I've never said this out loud before. This is only really just coming to my mind, but I'm putting it on record. I wonder if 11 throwing Henry in and creating that, whatever you want to call it, hole in the wall, through into the Upside Down, has been a kind of ticking time bomb for both universes in a slightly Fringe-esque, like crashing the two together. And actually, the reason time stopped there is because they've caused irreparable damage. I guess it happened when Will went over, not when Henry went over. But I wonder if there's a storyline in there about there being a tear between the two universes being a detrimental to both kind of scenario.
Yeah, that would make sense.
I also think there's a really depressing ending where you jump forward to the 90s. You know how when you're in the Upside Down, there's always all the particles floating around. There's like a really depressing version in the 90s where they're all dying of some debilitating lung disease from breathing all of that in.
But yeah, I did wonder that because it doesn't look like a healthy place to just walk around.
There's like a really, really dour ending where, like, as kids, they've vanquished the bad guys, and then 10 years down the line, they're all on ventilators because actually they're just like, it's asbestos.
Yeah. There is something about it where I'm like, spending time there can't be good for any of your internal organs. Yeah. I also wonder whether there's going to be like an evolution of Vecna, like whether there's a next level to his kind of
yeah. I mean, who is his boss?
Yeah, like is it the Mind Flayer? Is it all connected? But yeah, I think they've got a really interesting final season set up. That again, I feel like is going to be epic in a way that maybe people didn't.
It's going to surprise us, I think. I hope it does.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. So I think we've covered everything in volume 2.
I think so.
I don't feel like there is anything that we've missed or not talked about. We've talked about how awesome Eddie is, talked about all the characters, all their motives, their journey.
I think what we've not touched on.
Yes.
How awesome is Sadie Sink?
Oh my God, yeah.
What a season for her, really, like genuinely.
Yeah.
I know everyone is kind of heaping praise on her, but I think she really deserves it. Really deserves it.
Yeah, I was I know this is in volume 1, but I was so glad to see Billy back as well because I really like Billy as a character and I think the actor's great. But yeah, I mean, she carried a lot of the tension, and going into these 2 episodes when she makes the decision that she's like, I'll stop listening to Kate Bush and kind of be the bait. It was like ballsy. It's risky. But great. And like her relationship with Lucas is really nice as well. I'm glad that they kind of explored that a bit more.
That gave him some added depth when he was obviously trying to run away from who he was.
I thought that was nice. But yeah, so with that, I'm pretty sure we have covered.
Yeah, now we have. Yeah, that's
everything. Yes. Excellent. All right. Well, I don't know if I'll do another one of these solo episodes. I said it on the last hiatus episode that I wasn't sure if I would, but then volume 2 was great, and so I did. So maybe there'll be something else I will talk about. I don't know. Hopefully, Luke and I will be back talking all things pop culture soon. We've still got it on the cards that we want to talk about all the View Askew films, especially with the Clerks 3 trailer that's just dropped. But yeah, and I'm sure there'll be a load of stuff coming out of Comic-Con this weekend, which I want to.
I'm slightly sad. So we're going on holiday this weekend.
Yes,
not to San Diego. We're flying out to Chicago on Saturday at the worst possible time because basically we touch down in Chicago at 1:45, and the DC. So that's 1:45 Chicago, which is 11:45 San Diego time. Okay. So we're going to be in Central Time, there in Pacific, and the DC panel starts at 10:15. So we're going to be like the DC panel, the Warner Brothers panel will have finished by the time we land. So I'm just going to have to be like, right, okay, I need Wi-Fi now.
Yeah. Because
there will be a Black Adam trailer and a Shazam trailer and who knows what else. And I won't be around for it to live, and that can't happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of news. I feel like, especially because they haven't done a con for 2 years. Yeah. I feel like they're going to come back and hit it hard.
Yeah. I know that Warner Home Video are announcing the next year's worth of DC animated titles.
Ooh.
Because I was recording an interview with someone who wrote one of them and he accidentally mentioned that it was being announced.
Oh, well, there you go. Yes, this episode will come out on Friday, which is, I think, is that first day of con, or is Thursday the first day of con?
So Wednesday night preview night, Thursday's the first day with panels.
Cool. Well, yes, this will come out for all the Comic-Con listeners. people can jump back into Stranger Things for a bit if they want.
Yeah.
If they haven't got enough news, they can listen to us talk about Stranger Things.
Exactly.
Cool.
Why
All
would
right.
you not want to do that?
Exactly. Before we go, do you want to just promote Get Your Comic Con, just for any listeners who are jumping in at this point?
So we cover all of what is going on in the news at the moment. So we will be heavily covering Comic-Con, hopefully, over the weekend. Someone will, certainly not me. And you can catch all of that at getyourcomiccon.co.uk. And we're also a fortnightly-ish podcast, which is on all major platforms. And if you want to find us on social media, we're at Get Your Comic-Con on all platforms. And if you're interested in my random ramblings, then I'm at Neil Vagg on, again, all major platforms.
Amazing. Yes, definitely do follow both Neil and Get Your Comic-Con, because they are your source of everything pop culture, and they are far more eloquent than Luke and I when we
soaking it all up.
Yeah, Luke and I just ramble and rant and whatever else, and me on my own is just even worse. So yeah, but if you want to follow our stuff, we're just consistently pod on Twitter and Instagram, and yeah, keep an eye out for news of season 3 when Luke and I can finally get back together to rekindle our romance, as we call it. But yeah, cool. All right, well, yeah, it's coming. Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks everybody for taking the time to listen to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If there is anything pop culture coming up that you want me to specifically talk about, I might do a video on Thor, because I did see it, and people of this podcast will know how I feel about the MCU. But maybe I'll surprise you. I love Ms. Marvel, so
I've not seen Thor. I'm not in a rush.
Oh, scathing. But yeah, so just leave us a comment on social media or wherever, and we'll try and get back to it. Otherwise, thanks again, and we'll see you soon. Probably before season 5 of Stranger Things, hopefully. But we'll see. Thanks, Neil.
Thanks for having me.
And yeah, catch you soon. Bye.
Bye.